Jim Smith wanted me to do a video about the history of Atlantis, and he'd give me 20 bucks. You can't do it on the porch because it's too cold out there, and my porch is filled up. But so yeah, I prepared this. So this is to convince people that I found Atlantis, and I can't really prove that much of the Google Earth screen captures, because I didn't do a screen capture of the whole thing before the Navy or Google depixelated the area at the beginning of March 24. So, but I can show you the circles and point them out from the video screen capture I did. So this is mainly a video about why Atlantis is where it is from studying history correctly, common sense historical study. With a little bit, with also the final, showing that there's too many coincidences, and then you got the final nail in the coffin with the actual city. Okay. So I started to write the list here of all the coincidences, but I only wrote 2, and then I gave up. Maybe I'll write them in here after. But it's like, oh yeah, city. City size. I mean, I could keep going. Maybe I'll do this when I talk it. So let's get going. So I have about 100 some odd images to share with you. We're going to start up here and move down. The beginning ones are going to be images, and then it's going to be screen captures of actual studying. A couple of images. You dig it? So, Sozy schmozy woo. Thanks, Jim, for the idea. And if 20 people can give me 20 bucks, I can get 400 bucks off this. So, this is the Richet structure. I just built this on Google Earth. That is you can't zoom these. Whatever. That's the Richet structure of turned into Atlantis, how I would think that they're talking about, because it's supposed to be an island in the sea, and they're like, the sea? They're like, but yeah, there was water in there. Okay, so that's the sea? I made it kind of small. Was it like a bigger sea? I don't know, you tell me. And that's the canal of that's how big the island he said it was. So I rebuilt it. That's where the city is. And here, actually, this is the next one. So that's where the city is. There. And the actual side, that's the actual length of the canal. And he said and that's the actual tallest mountain of Mauritania, which is like 3,000 feet high. So it's right here. It's called Kedjet El Jil. It's only 3,002 feet tall, 915 meters. So I think what they described is the sea comes in, and then they were Plato was talking about a bunch of islands, so I scattered some islands around in the sea that they were talking about. But Plato also said that the city was right next to the sea. So I guess the sea, if I did this right, you put the city way up here. But this is the center of the Richet structure. So that's what the real Atlantis would look like on top of the Richet. So they say it's the right size. It's the right size. Like the big overall Richet is, I guess, around the same size as the city of Atlantis. But that's the outer wall of the city of Atlantis. I think they're saying that they're recognizing these circles, these little circles. But the little circles, you don't see any circles where they would be in the middle. It's just that the circles are out here. So you're saying that Atlantis had like big streets that they did around? Because by the time you get this one here, that's way out clear over here, like way away from the water. So so yeah, and then the city would also have to be at the north. So yeah, that's as good as I could get it. But it was supposed to be right next to the shoreline. So this is Atlantis. How he described it, and it's coincidentally the same size as modern day like cities. Like that's Atlantis superimposed on Rome. That's the ring city, the ring around Rome, which is about the same size as ancient Rome was, which is pretty cool. That's Atlantis on top of Boulder, so it's about as big as Denver. So that's Atlantis. Now this is my little trick. This is the circle of Atlantis that you can see. Not now, you can't see it anymore. I forgot to do the screen capture of what it looks like now. But right now, if you were to look at this, it would just be glazed over, just blue. You wouldn't see any of these ripples. Go check it out. You'll see what I'm talking about. The only place to see this is here. So here's the circle, right? And there's clearly a circle here too. Maybe you can't see it so much from this angle, but look how it's the same size. And look how the circle on the inside's the same size. Here, my hand's shaking. Okay. So there's Atlantis above with the circle looking above. There's the outer circle, inner circle. So in the middle of the inner circle is where the Temple of Poseidon is, which I found. So there's the island of Atlantis. Now, the island had to have been. So what Plato said. This is where I say it is, and that's where I built my Atlantis. I actually built it on Google Earth. But the real Atlantis is actually right there. Now I put Atlantis there because I figured it would be there, because he said if you go out straight from the Pillars of Gibraltar, you'll hit here. And this island here is where Columbus landed. This island here is where Columbus landed, right here. So, the first time. So if you just randomly go west, it took him 66 days to get here. 6,600 kilometers. And Plato said you come from the north, and as you're coming in, the mountains go really precipitously into Atlantis. And so this is what the mountain was, because it's still this is the highest point in all of the Bahamas. And so back in those days, this was steep mountains, cliffs, all the way down to the sea. And this is the way that you would get to Atlantis when you would go to Europe and back. So it would have been protected to the north, and you would be seeing cliffs coming down to it from the north, and then you would have their own little bay right next to it, their own little inland lake next to it. So the wall is right next to the city, to the sea. And so the real Atlantis, same thing. And so the other thing is the island would have to be 555 by 370 kilometers. Okay? That would have to be 370 kilometers. That would have to be 555 kilometers because he said it was 2,000 by 3,000 stadia. And 2,000 times 185 is 370,000 meters, which is 370 kilometers. And 3,000 times 185, which is the Athenian stadia, is 555 kilometers, which is exactly here to here is 555, and exactly here to here is 370. So it's in the same location, same size, and you're also going to be expecting a flat plain, a really flat plain on the southern side. Okay, so protected to the north, entrance at the north, southern side is the plain, and it's an oval shaped island that's 555 by 370. That's what we're looking for according to Plato. And it's also supposed to be out here, and if it has great influence, it'll be right next, they'll describe the American continent as well, and it's supposed to be right out, that you bump into it if you go straight up. Alright, so let's, based on, if what they would say is based on reality, that's what they would say. Okay, so here's a close-up. This would be the southern flat plain. Now this is pre-depixelation, okay? Now unfortunately this is a screen capture from before the trench. There's this really deep trench literally right here. But you can see like a wall around there. You can see a line of a trench there. You know, this is just a far away screen capture. But all those little white dots are like buildings and stuff. You can't see any of that anymore. So that's where I thought Atlantis was, and that's where the real Atlantis is next to it. You can see it, the circle. You can see the circle easily. It's right there. Right? Maybe I can show it the mouse. Yeah, I'll show it the mouse. This mouse sucks. I'll show you how crappy my mouse is. So that's the circle. You dig it? Whoops. That's the circle. Okay? Now, let's move along. So that's my Atlantis, built on, it's on Flickr. You can get there from my website. Built on Google Earth. So that's the real city, where the real city would be. That white dot in the middle is the actual Temple of Poseidon next to the actual Chichen Itza pyramid. You can see them clearly. I'm not going to include them in this video because I don't have any screen capture vids of it. I didn't get around to it. There's the Exceed 4000. That's the range of historic cannon. That's the range of modern cannon. So it's protected. You couldn't get in without getting attacked. And this is the highest mountain in this is Andros Island. This is where the mountains would be, going right into it. Okay. For some reason I don't have the canal, but I did build the canal, and it's not on the screen capture. But it's exactly how long he said it was. 1,850 kilometers, like 1,100 miles or something. And it does, when it looks like this, it winds around like this, looks great, fills up this space perfectly, comes in here, dumps out there. Okay. I wish I had remembered to include it in the screen capture. But he said the island was divided into 10 states. These are the different 10 states. I put 10 different colors. I'm going to run out of battery, so let's hurry up. This is the screen capture from the icon, the 20 pixel icon image from my website, 32 image. And that's from the Atlantis that I built, not the real Atlantis. So there's my Atlantis here with the real Atlantis here. So I got pretty close. I guessed it would be at the bottom, but they put it there. I guess they're more in the middle than me. But that's what it looks like from an angle. You can see the circle. All right. So there's the island of Atlantis, and it's surrounded by a bunch of islands. So if you're going to hear that somebody do an accurate description of it, you're going to be hearing somebody say, well, yeah, there's an island that's that size, but it's surrounded by a bunch of others, like this one up here. And there's a big continent also over here, a huge continent that takes up like the entire planet. Another island here, another island here, a bunch of islands down there. It's just islands up the wazoo. Okay? Now this is the biggest blue area of the whole world, so it's looks like an island that was washed away. Oh, and this is where the comet fragments are. You can't really see it. I can't zoom in. This is Google Earth, but all the comet fragments mainly hit Atlantis. Like it was a dead-on hit right in Atlantis. So that's what people described it to be. They thought it was way out in the sea, but bigger. But this is the real Atlantis. So little one. That's they got one of them right. So there's the drawing. Another drawing. Now, this person didn't listen. Because these are the circles, but then he said you had to go another, from the outer edge, you had to go another 9.25 kilometers out. Another 50 stadia. 50 times 185 is 9,250 meters. And that was the outer edge of the city. And then the city, and then you had the ocean. But he got it, correct, being the city right next to the ocean. But just an example of not listening. And they have a mountain in the middle and not the Temple of Poseidon. That was just something that was labeled Atlantis. Somebody thought the Atlantis was near the Dead Sea. I thought that was interesting. That's my Atlantis. There is the Temple of Poseidon. Real size. With the Pyramid of Giza and the Colosseum of Rome. The Versailles is here. And all of the biggest statues of the world. The Statue of Liberty is that little one right down there. That's how big the statues of the world are anyways. And that's the Eiffel Tower. So, and they had a navy of mini boats, of like 1,300 boats. Those are their 1,300 boats there. So, I have 2 bars left. So, the Greeks talked about the battle of the gods, where Poseidon ruled. I think this is taken from Donnelly. So, these are the screen captures from Herodotus and Plato, okay? It's on my website. This is screen captures from my website. So what he said was, after the deluge, one of the survival of Dulicon and Pyrrha, and he traced the events, and he traced the genealogy of descendants, reckoning up to the dates, tried to compute how many years ago the events which would happen. So there was the Greeks all knew about this huge deluge, and the only guy who survived into Athens was Deucalion and Pyrrha. Okay, but the story doesn't survive. But we know that there was a huge deluge, and so I wanted to now take the time to explain why it's not over at the Richat structure. Because I think people are understanding Rome history incorrectly. Plato didn't say that you go route from the Pillars of Gibraltar and then you take a left and then you go, around the western promontory of Africa, which they called Libya. And then you go back into some inland sea that used to exist, because they would have said that. If he was going to say, like, we're going to go and we're going to circumnavigate Africa, then they would have made that clear and we would have understood. And he actually did say that they circumnavigated Africa. Herodotus was born 116 years after the Pharaoh Necho II of Egypt, who was the guy who sent. He built a huge canal. He was the first, I think, pharaoh to build a canal from the Red Sea. I mean, from the Nile to the Red Sea. And so, after building that canal, he got the idea to send an expedition around the entire continent of Africa. And so they would have to leave from the canal toward the east, but they would have to return from the west. And they took them 3 years. But they did it. They went around and they planted crops for the winter, and then grew corn, and then took their corn and went around and went back into the Straits of Gibraltar and made their way back to Egypt. And they said that on the right side, the sun was way over to the right. So proving they went like way south. So here's the book from Herodotus. Libya Herodotus was born. This book was written in he was born like 360 BC, and Necho was like 560 BC. He was born. Herodotus was like 116 years younger. So if Necho lived 120 years, he could have met him. So Libya furnishes. So this is all like fresh news that they just went around Africa. Okay. Libya furnishes proofs about itself that it is surrounded by sea. Libya meaning Africa, except so much of it that borders on Asia. Okay, so not including the Red Sea way over in Asia, but Africa surrounded by a sea. Okay, so Necho II was the pharaoh who sent. He lived from 610 to 5. He reigned from 610 to 595. So he reigned 116 years before Herodotus was born, because Herodotus was from 484 to 425. So this is all new news that they had just done that. Okay, so so here's Necho. When he ceased digging the canal, which goes through the Nile to the Arabian Gulf, sent Phoenicians with ships, bidding them sail and come back through the Pillars of Hercules to the northern sea, and so to Egypt. Okay. They reported a thing which I cannot believe, but another man may, that namely sailing around Libya, that they had the sun on their right hand. It's true. So then, they had another guy. The Carthaginians tried to have a guy sail through Pillars of Hercules. So now they had the Carthaginians. Just a couple hundred years later, it was like an arms race to get around Africa. They tried to do it the other way, though, counterclockwise, because the queen said that she could be compelled, I have these in reverse, to sail around Libya, Africa, until in sailing round it, he came to the Arabian Gulf. So they all knew it was around, was a circle. You can go around it because the Egyptians just did it. So then this dude. So he sailed to the Pillars of Hercules, right? And then why he had not completely sailed around Libya was that the ship could not advance any farther, but got stuck fast. So the wind was too much for him around the Cape of Good Hope or whatever, and he chickened out and came back. And the Cape is really hard, and maybe it's harder to do it counterclockwise and counterclockwise, okay? And they also knew that these are the Scythians. But they know that it says that the river produces these effects which flows from the ocean, and that the ocean flows round the whole earth. They know that the ocean flows around the whole earth. All right. So they know that the Mediterranean Sea is just like a lake compared to all of the Atlantic Ocean. So now we're talking about Atlantis. So what he heard is that Atlantis owned everything inside the Pillars of Hercules as far as Egypt. So Atlantis owned Egypt. Egypt was the culture of Atlantis. Okay, that's why Egypt is different from everywhere else. It's the culture of of Atlantis, which was from a long way away. And they also owned from Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, okay? These are the Tyrrhenian languages. So as far as Italy. So Atlantis even owned Egypt and Italy. So they were encroaching on Greece, right next to Greece. All the way from out there. Okay, so in the first place, there is, this is the Atlantean Constitution, which I wanted to include. I think it's cool that they have the freaking Atlantean Constitution. In the first place, there is a caste of priests which is separated from all others. Next, there is artificers who ply their several crafts by themselves and do not intermix. There is also a class of shepherds and hunters, as well as that of husbandmen. And you will observe too that there are warriors of Egypt distinct from all their classes who are commanded by law to devote themselves solely to military pursuits. So any constitution like starts with not modern, but ancient constitutions start with the different classes. So that's the Atlantean Constitution for you. Apart from the kings who have absolute control, they had some more information too. So we had 10 kings who controlled 10 different jurisdictions. So Hectos, the historian, Athenian historian, was in Thebes and had traced his descent and connection to his family with a god in the 16th generation before. So he traced his family all the way back to a guy who was in the Priest of Scythe God column. Okay, now he went to Sais, and Sais in Herodotus' histories is mentioned 17 times. So Sais is it was the ancient capital of Egypt, the #1 first capital of Egypt, and it was basically in those days like Alexandria was on the shore of Egypt in the capital. Sais was on the shore of Egypt in the capital, but then of course the silt came and that's not on the shore anymore. So he went to Sais, and from the first king down to the priest of Hephaestus, who reigned last, there had been 341 generations of men, and that in them there had been the same number of chief priests and of kings, but 300 generations of men are equal to 10,000 years. 400 years is 3 generations of men, okay? So 10,000 years from back then. So he went in there and he saw colossal wooden statues of numbering the same as he said. For each chief priest there sits up his lifetime an image of himself. Accordingly, the priest, counting and showing me these, declared to me that each one of them was a son succeeding his own father, and they went up through the series of images from the image of one who had died to the last until they had declared this the whole number. And when when Hectos had traced his descent and connected his family with the god in the 16th generation, they traced a descent in opposition to this, besides their numbering and not accepting it from him, or the man had been born from a Greek until they declared one of their whole 345 statues. Okay, so over 10,000 years. So, thus, in the period of 11,340 years, said there had arisen no God in human form. So, something happened. There was a problem. 3,340 years, okay? So, that is, a long more time than that from now. So, he said, the goddess who is the common patron and parent and educator of both our cities, Athens, because he's talking to Solon, this is Plato, Athens and Sais, she founded your city 1,000 years before ours, receiving from the earth and Hephaestus the seed of your race, and afterwards she founded ours, of which the constitution is recorded in our sacred registers to be 8,000 years old, as touching your citizens of 9,000 years ago. So 9,000 plus 2,360, because That's how long ago he was. So 11,260 years ago, 360 years ago. So, in those days, the Atlantic was navigable, okay? So they knew what the Atlantic was. It was the Atlantic Ocean, and it was navigable, okay? They're not getting confused about taking a wrong turn and going back up into Africa. And they knew what it was, and they were going around it. Many great and wonderful deeds are recorded of your state in our histories, but one of them exceeds all the rest in greatness and valor. So these are actual historical deeds recorded in your state. So if a deed is recorded in your state, that means that they're like the scribes write it down in their in stone and put them in their sacred tablets in their temple. So it's seen as history. It's not seen as like a metaphorical story, because that's what a lot of people. That's what this. I think Clint Dibble said to Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock. So the battery's about to die. I'll just have to do the other computer after this. So Atlantis and Athens got into a battle. But Athens she defeated and triumphed over the invaders and preserved from slavery those who were not yet subjugated, and generously liberated all the rest of us who dwelt within the pillars. Okay? So it was people who lived within the pillars versus people who lived without the pillars. So it had to be the people who lived in an island way out in the Atlantic Ocean when the Atlantic was navigable, outside of the Pillars of Hercules, outside of the Straits of Gibraltar, coming inside. Okay? They're being very clear. Okay. All men who lived in those days were the most illustrious. Like Cro-Magnon, who went extinct, I guess, 35,000 years ago, but they had bigger brains than we did. So they were bigger, more muscular, and had bigger heads. Bigger brain must mean smarter, because it's same shapes. And so then the priest said, "Oh, Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are never anything but children. And there is not an old man among you," Solon in return asked him what he meant. "I meant you say," he replied, "that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you why. There have been, and will be again, many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water, and others lesser ones by innumerable other causes." So he's saying, this Greek is saying that you Greeks don't know, because there are again and again, there have been and will be again many destructions of mankind, revising out of many causes, mostly from fire and water. Fire, comets coming from the sky, causing tsunamis with the water. And it's a cyclical thing. Pathon, the son of Helos, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now this is in the form of a myth, but really signifies declination of bodies moving in the heavens around the earth, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth, which recurs after long intervals. So it's the comets coming in very predictively and destroying the earth with these comets and these floods all the time, and the only people who survive are the Egyptians, because everybody else gets annihilated. At such times, those who live upon the mountains and in dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on the seashore. And from this calamity, the Nile, who is our never-failing Savior, delivers and preserves us. So Egypt always survives the calamities, and so that they can preserve their culture. exactly the same as it was created originally by the Atlanteans, who created Egypt, who owned Egypt. It was part of Atlantean civilization. When, on the other hand, the gods purge earth with a deluge of water, the survivors in your country are herdsmen and shepherds who dwell in the mountains, but those who, like you, live in cities are carried by rivers into the sea, whereas in this land, neither then nor any other time does the water come down from above on the fields, having always a tendency to come up from below, for which reason traditions preserved here are the most ancient. So they get their water coming as if from the earth, just coming down, always feeding them, even when everybody else is starving. And he said that, like the Athenians, they got carried by the rivers into the sea. So the river turned into a huge river, and it washed away their whole city into the sea. In Athens, but not in Egypt. In the meantime, nothing in Egypt had been changed from its usual state. In all of the inundations, Egypt always keeps their culture and all of their technology and knowledge and everything, because they're impervious to the calamities. And this time, they said that the sun had moved 4 times from the accustomed place of rising. That's how long Egypt had been. Since Egypt was founded by the Atlanteans, the sun moved 4 times. That's how old Egypt is. There was an island situated in front of the straits, which are by you called the Pillars of Hercules. So it was situated in front of. Okay. So when you leave the Straits of Hercules, you go out into the sea because it's in front of it. You know, like you leave your house. My car's in front of my house. I leave my house to the car. You don't go left or right. You don't go left like they say at the rich people. Okay. And was the way to other islands. That Atlantis had other islands. This island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire which had rule over the whole island and several others. So it's in an area of lots of islands. From these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent. There's another continent over there, which surrounded the true ocean. Oh, it went over the whole ocean. For this sea, which is within the straits, the Mediterranean Sea within the Straits of Gibraltar, of Hercules, is only a harbor. The Mediterranean is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, the Strait of Gibraltar. But that other is a real sea, Atlantic Ocean. And the surrounding land, the Americas, may be most truly called a boundless continent, because it goes all the way from North Pole to almost the south. He's talking about America. Over parts of the continent. So Atlantis owned the islands and also parts of the American continent. But then the Younger Dryas came. When the comet came between 12,090 and 11,070. So here's my timeline. I'm just comparing them. These are the dates. That's 10,000 years ago. That's 11,000 years ago. That's 12,000 years ago. Now, this is when Atlantis was said to have started. 1,384. 11,384 years ago. And then, that was a typo. And the priests go back to 11,990 years ago. Egypt was 13,724 years ago, which was the last king, or the last god. There hasn't been a god in Atlantis since here. The priests of Sais started here, which was 11,990 years ago. The Athens was founded here,
Sais was founded here. Athens was founded here. No god seen in Egypt since here. Priests of Egypt here. Scientifically, Younger Dryas. So it actually overlaps. He's talking about something happening here, which pretty much is the same. And then the Younger Dryas happens, they move to Egypt, and then they found Athens, and then they found Sais. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared into the depths of the sea, for which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsidence of the island. So, the island was hit by the wave, 1,000-foot wave, washed away the whole island except for the mountains like Andros, and now it's just mud. So you can't sail in it. And then after 10,000 years, 11,000 years, the mud falls down, and now it's about 50 feet deep. It's the biggest place in the world with light blue water. Only place in the world, big place in the world like that. For the fact that is a single night of excessive rain washed away the earth and laid bare the rock. At the same time there were earthquakes, and then occurred the extraordinary inundation, which was the third before the great destruction of Deucalion. But in primitive times the hill of the Acropolis extended to the Eridanus, the Ilyssus, and included the Pnyx on the other side, and the Lycabettus as a boundary on the opposite side to the Pnyx, and was all well covered with soil and level to the top, except in one or two places. I actually Googled Earth that. It's this big area between the hills of Athens, and he said that there, in one day and night, the rain was so bad that in one rain, just like in the Bible, 40 days and nights, that it washed away all of the dirt between the Acropolis and the Pnyx into the sea. Just like how remember how I said the Egyptians said, how the Athenians, they were washed into the sea from the rivers? And now he said it here. Clint Dibble mentioned it, but he said that everybody knows that that couldn't happen. But we're talking about a super deluge, like the ones that created the big ripples in the land and moved the rocks, okay, and flooded Atlantis. That's what it did to Athens. So when Columbus traveled to Atlantis, he landed on San Salvador Island, okay, on 12th of October 1492. So if that is the island of Atlantis, okay, that's the north end, that's the south end, that's San Salvador Island, which is right in the middle of the island of Atlantis. He left there, blindly headed west, crashed right in to the island of Atlantis. If there had been an island there, he would have crashed right into the island of Atlantis. After 66 days, 6,600 kilometers. So the island was oblong shape. Okay, remember how I said we were looking for an oval-shaped island? Extending in one direction, 3,000 stadia, but across the center of the island it was 2,000 stadia. So it has to be 555 kilometers by 370 kilometers, which is. If you check on my Google Earth, if you check it, that's exactly how big it is. This part of the island looked toward the south and was sheltered from the north. Remember how I said it was sheltered on the north side? And the island where they inhabited, the plain, was on the south. The whole country was said by him to be very lofty and precipitous on the side of the sea. So as you're going in on the sea, remember that big mountain, the highest point in all of Andros, is right next to where you would, that narrow area you'd go going into see Atlantis. Meeting at the city, there was there let off into the sea? All right, so they're talking about the canal. I have it in the next up. In the center of the island, at a distance of about 50 stadia, there was a mountain, not very high on any side. Okay, so that's where they originally built the Temple of Poseidon. That's the center of Atlantis. Evanor, who founded the city, this is the beginning story of Atlantis. In the center, at a distance of about 50 stadia. Okay, so that means the center of the city was about 50 stadia from the sea. Meaning, but the edge of the wall was like 50 stadia. The edge of the water was like 50 stadia, he said, which is 9.25 kilometers from the edge of the wall. So the edge of the wall had to be right at the edge of the sea, pretty much. That's basically what he's saying. The country immediately about and surrounding the city was a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains, which descended toward the sea. It was smooth and even. So remember, the southern plain of Atlantis is all that big, smooth and even area, rectangle shaped area, and then up in the north is Andros Island, which is the highest part of the whole thing, but it was right next to the sea. Like, you see how Andros Island goes right into the sea? So it was a huge mountain right next to it. Just like what they say here. So, they describe the plain. It was fashioned by nature and by the labors of many generations of kings through long ages, as was the most part rectangular and oblong. So the meadows supplied food enough for every animal, wild or tame. So if there's wild animals living there, it was a big island. So their canal was 10,000 stadia in length, which is 1,850 kilometers, like 1,100 miles. It was falling, okay, so it started falling out of the straight line. And then there was a circle ditch. So from the mountains, there was a straight line, a very huge ditch, which I can't show you, but it was there. I don't have a screen capture. And then the ditch for 1,800 kilometers. I included the straight line because there's this huge straight ditch. You wouldn't believe it. Okay, so it's 100 feet in depth. So you would expect to maybe still see it even after the inundation. There it's really deep. Okay, so then there was a circular ditch that had to be that long, 1,800 kilometers. There were straight canals of 100 feet in width that were cut through the plain and again led off into the ditch, leading to the sea. These canals were intervals of 100 stadia. So it was very, very developed. The size of a lot was a square of 10 stadia each way, which is like 1.85 kilometers. And the total number of all with lots was 60,000. 60,000 lots that have like 850 acres, or like 45 hectares or something. Huge farms, 60,000 of them, and just in the plain. The ends meeting at the mouth of the canal, which led to the sea. So this is, he's talking about the wall that goes around the city. They met at the canal, which they would take the boats into the sea, which was right there. Okay. So, here was Poseidon's own temple, which was a stadium in length and half of a stadium in width and of a proportionate height. So really tall, really big. And so that's 100 meters by, well, it was 185 meters. Yeah. In length, 185 meters by 92.5 meters. So on Google Earth, you can actually see a building that's 92.5 meters exactly, a perfect square that's exactly 92.5 meters wide, and then it goes down and kind of gets buried halfway in. But it looks like, so that I just traced where it went in, and it's this big rectangle, and it's obviously right there, and then right next to it's a perfect square, which is the exact same size as the Pyramid of Chichen Itza, and then north of it there's some actual other perfect squares too, but you can't see any of that anymore. But it's the same exact height, and it's the same exact location, smack dab in the middle of that circle, in the middle of the small circle. Like that white that you see, that's the actual trace of the actual building. I built the city deliberately with that in the middle of it. And the circle. So that circle here, smack dab in the middle of that circle is that building that I saw. Okay, and that's the circle inside, which I can see from here. Okay, unfortunately you can't see the actual. It's too bad. I was looking at it all the time. Alright, so that's my video. The battery's about to die. So at the end of the video, I'm going to attach the zoom in. There's a video that zooms in and out. And you can play it. You can do a screen capture and just zoom in and out and see. Because when it's moving, it's easier to see the circle. And just examine what they said. I mean, just examine what they're saying, and then try to get your head into them and realize that they're smarter than you realize they were. They wouldn't make these kind of literary miscommunications about accidentally going back into Africa and there was some big sea in Africa, but then it evaporated because it was so long ago. Why not just look at the Andros Island and then compare what you see in the zoom in and out with what you would see in Google Earth now, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then ask, why did they depixelate? Why did the Navy do that? And the guy who says that it's a reach-out structure, he was worked in the Army. Was his name Jimmy something? He worked in the Army. He worked for the Army. And it was the Army, it was the Navy who depixelated this. So, anyways.